The police tape fluttered in the cold October wind, marking the line nobody dared to cross. Detective Henry Foster stood in the shadows of the warehouse district, binoculars pressed to his eyes, watching 3 armed men hold a 12-year-old girl hostage inside that building. Outside, news helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through the dusk like accusatory fingers. The whole city held its breath. But the woman standing beside him, Vivien Hartwell, the girl's mother, the billionaire whose empire touched every corner of this city, her face was still as ice. No tears, no pleading, just that frozen mask she wore like armor, while her assistant whispered updates about board meetings and her phone buzzed relentlessly in her hand. Henry had seen a lot of desperate parents in 20 years wearing this badge. Mothers who screamed, fathers who broke down, but Vivien Hartwell stood there like a statue. And nobody, not the officers, not the negotiators, not even Henry himself, knew if it was strength or something far more terrifying. Inside that warehouse, her daughter was running out of time. And out here, nobody dared to touch the billionaire's daughter. Nobody dared to tell her mother the truth until Henry Foster decided someone had to speak up. Henry Foster had been a detective for 20 years, but he had been a single father for 16. Those 2 facts shaped everything about the way he saw the world now. When his wife, Amanda, died in that car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning, he was left with a 6-month-old daughter and a choice. He could quit the force, or he could figure out how to be both parents at once. He chose the latter. Larissa was 16 now, sharp-tongued and smarter than he ever was at her age. Every day, he thanked whatever power was listening that she had turned out okay despite his mistakes. He had missed recitals because of crime scenes. He had shown up to parent-teacher conferences still wearing his badge. But he had always shown up. That was the promise he made to her the day they buried her mother. He would always show up, no matter the cost. Standing here in the growing darkness, watching Vivien Hartwell stare at her phone instead of the warehouse where her daughter was trapped, Henry felt something hot and furious coil in his chest. He had seen hostage situations before, talked down armed robbers, desperate addicts, and men who had nothing left to lose. But he had never seen a parent act like this. Captain Henry Hayes stood a few feet away, barking orders into his radio, coordinating the SWAT team that was getting into position around the perimeter. The plan was simple and brutal. Wait for the negotiator to make contact, assess the situation, and if things went south, send in the team with flash grenades and prayers. Henry had seen that plan go wrong before, seen the body bags that came out when it did. The hostage negotiator, Irene Marshall, a woman with 20 years of experience and a voice like warm honey, was already on the phone with the men inside. Henry could hear her through the radio clipped to his belt, her tone calm and reassuring, trying to establish rapport. But the voice that answered her was jagged with rage and pain. It belonged to a man named Corbin Brennan, and Henry knew that name. He had pulled Corbin Brennan's file as soon as the crisis began, cross-referencing it with Vivien Hartwell's company records. Corbin Brennan had worked as head of security for Hartwell Industries for 8 years. He had been good at his job by all accounts. Then 3 years ago, his daughter, Audrey, had been diagnosed with leukemia. She fought for 2 years. Audrey Brennan died on a Thursday afternoon in March. Corbin took 1 day off for the funeral. When he came back to work the next week, he was told his position had been eliminated. Restructuring, they called it. Vivien Hartwell had signed the termination papers herself. Henry glanced at Vivien now. She was listening to her assistant, a young man in an expensive suit who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Vivien nodded at something he said, her expression unreadable. Henry wondered if she even remembered signing those papers, if she remembered Corbin Brennan at all. He wondered if she knew that the man holding her daughter hostage had once been a father just like him, desperate and grieving, and trying to hold his world together with both hands. He wondered if it would matter to her if she did. The radio crackled, Irene's voice still calm, but with an edge now. "Corbin, I need you to help me understand what you want here. What can I do to make this situation better for everyone?" There was a long pause filled with static and the distant sound of sirens. Then Corbin spoke, and his voice was raw. "You want to make it better? You can't. You can't bring my daughter back. You can't make her care. She doesn't care about anyone but herself. Not me, not her own kid, nobody." Henry felt something shift in his understanding of the situation. This was not about money. This was not about revenge in the traditional sense. This was about being seen. about making someone feel what you felt. He looked at Vivien again and saw her hand tighten around her phone just for a second, just enough to make him wonder. Inside the dim, dust-filled warehouse, Louisa Hartwell sat on the cold concrete floor, her hands bound tightly in front of her with zip ties. Her 12-year-old face was pale, streaked with dirt and fear. Her eyes, wide and dark, darted around the cavernous space. The air was heavy, stale, carrying the faint scent of old oil and concrete. Louisa had asthma, and each breath felt like a struggle, quick and shallow. Her inhaler was in her backpack, just out of reach, a cruel reminder of her dwindling medication. She had tried to keep quiet, to not draw attention to herself, but every so often a small cough would escape, rattling her fragile chest. The three armed men holding her moved restlessly, their shadows dancing ominously in the weak, flickering emergency lights that barely pierced the gloom. They were young, edgy, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and bravado. Louisa could feel their uncertainty, their growing impatience, but she dared not hope. She simply watched, a silent, terrified witness to a nightmare unfolding. Time, she knew, was a luxury she did not have. Captain Henry Hayes approached Henry, his face grim. "Foster, we are going to give Marshall another 15 minutes, then we move in. I want you coordinating with SWAT on the east entrance." Henry shook his head. "Captain, with all due respect, I think we are approaching this wrong. This is not a robbery, this is personal. If we go in hard, people die, including the girl." Captain Hayes's jaw tightened. "You have a better idea, Detective?" Henry did. It was risky, and probably against every protocol in the book, but it was the only thing that made sense. "Let me talk to him, father to father. I think I can get through to him." Captain Hayes looked at Henry for a long moment, then at Vivien, then back. "You have 10 minutes, Foster. After that, we do this my way." Henry nodded and moved toward the command van where Irene was set up. She looked up as he entered, her expression questioning. "I need the phone," Henry said. Irene hesitated, then handed it over. "He is wound tight, Henry. Be careful." Henry pressed the phone to his ear. "Corbin, my name is Henry Foster. I am a detective, but I am also a single dad. I heard about Audrey. I am so sorry for your loss." There was silence on the other end, then quietly. "What do you know about loss?" Henry closed his eyes. "My wife died when my daughter was 6 months old, drunk driver. I raised Larissa alone. She's 16 now. I know what it is like to be terrified every single day that you are not enough, that you are going to fail the one person who depends on you most." Another long pause stretched between them, thin and taut as a wire. When Corbin spoke again, his voice was softer, but still laced with an aching bitterness. "Then you understand. You understand what it is like when someone takes everything from you and does not even notice, does not even care." Henry looked out the window of the van at Vivien. She was watching the warehouse now, finally, her face still a mask of perfect control, but her posture rigid, her shoulders drawn tight. "I understand," Henry said carefully, "but Corbin, Louisa did not take anything from you. She is just a kid, just like Audrey was, just like my Larissa is. She does not deserve to pay for her mother's mistakes." Corbin laughed, a bitter, broken sound that scraped against Henry's ears. "Her mother does not even want her. Do you know that? She was an accident, a mistake. Vivien Hartwell built an empire, and this kid was just collateral damage. She doesn't love her. She never did." Henry felt the pieces falling into place, a chilling mosaic of grief and corporate indifference. This was not about making Vivien pay money. This was about making her feel something, anything. He thought about Larissa, about the way she rolled her eyes at his dad jokes, but still hugged him goodnight. He thought about the fear that lived in his chest every time she was late coming home, every time she did not answer her phone. He thought about what it would be like to lose that, to have that ripped away and then be discarded like you never mattered at all. "Corbin," Henry said, and his voice was steady now, certain, infused with the quiet authority of a man who understood profound loss. "I need you to listen to me. What you are doing right now, it is not going to fix anything. It is not going to bring Audrey back, and it is going to destroy Louisa. Is that what Audrey would want? Is that what you want?" The silence stretched out long and fragile, punctuated only by the distant thrum of the news helicopters and the faint, shallow breathing he could hear from Louisa in the background. Her file said she had asthma. Her medication was running out. Time was running out for all of them, for the girl inside, for the grieving father on the phone, for the detective trying to bridge an impossible chasm. I just wanted her to feel it, Corbin said finally, his voice breaking, a raw, exposed wound. I just wanted her to know what it is like to care about someone and lose them, to be powerless, to be nothing. Henry's throat tightened, a lump of shared pain lodging there. She feels it, Corbin. I promise you, she feels it. But she does not know how to show it. Some people, they build walls so high that they forget how to let anyone in, even the people they love most. He did not know if that was true. He did not know anything about Vivien Hartwell except what he could see, a woman made of ice and ambition. Standing in the ruins of a crisis, she seemed unable to comprehend. But he knew fear when he saw it, even when it wore a mask, especially when it wore a mask. Captain Henry Hayes appeared at the van door, tapping his watch. Time was up. Henry made a decision that would either save lives or end his career. Probably both. He stepped out of the van and walked toward Vivien Hartwell. She looked up as he approached, her eyes wary, her composure still unnervingly perfect. "Miss Hartwell," Henry began, his voice low and insistent, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you love your daughter?" The question seemed to startle her. Her assistant, Finn, took a nervous step back, sensing danger. Vivian's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since she arrived, Henry saw something flicker across her face, something that looked almost like pain. "Of course I do," she said, but her voice was flat, automatic, devoid of any genuine emotion. Henry shook his head. "That is not what I asked. I asked if you love her, not if you provide for her, not if you keep her safe. Do you love her?" Vivien stared at him, and for a moment he thought she might actually answer. Then her face shuddered again, the ice sliding back into place, a polished, impenetrable facade. "I do not see how that is relevant, Detective Foster. My personal feelings are not the issue here. The issue is getting Louisa out safely." Henry felt his patience snap, a thin thread of protocol giving way to a more urgent, human imperative. "Your personal feelings are the entire issue, Miss Hartwell. That man in there, Corbin Brennan, he does not want your money. He wants you to care. He wants you to feel something. And right now, standing here watching you, I am not sure you can." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and unforgiving, cutting through the hum of the city. Vivian's face went pale, a ghost of the woman she usually presented to the world. Finn made a small sound of protest, but she held up one hand to silence him, her fingers rigid. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet, stripped bare of its usual authority. "You do not know anything about me, Detective Foster. You do not know what I have sacrificed, what I have built, what I have had to give up to keep this company alive, to keep people employed, to keep Billionaire." She stopped abruptly, her jaw clenching, the unspoken words heavy in the cold air. Henry stepped closer, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "To keep from falling apart," he said. "Is that what you were going to say?" Vivien turned away from him, her shoulders rigid, a wall built of pride and pain. "I need to make some calls. Excuse me." She walked away before he could respond, her heels clicking against the pavement with metronomic precision, a steady beat of controlled retreat. Henry watched her go and felt a wave of frustration crash over him, a sense of having failed to pierce the impenetrable armor. Captain Henry Hayes appeared at his elbow, his voice dry, laced with a familiar weariness. "That went well," he said. "SWAT is in position. We move in 3 minutes." Henry looked at the warehouse, its dark bulk looming against the city lights. 3 minutes, not enough time, not nearly enough time. He pulled out his phone and called the line to Corbin again, his fingers fumbling slightly with the urgency. "Corbin, it is Henry. I need you to do something for me. I need you to let me come in there. Just me. No weapons, no tricks. I want to talk to you face to face." The response was immediate and sharp, a burst of raw anger. "Are you insane? I will shoot you the second you walk through that door." Henry took a deep, steadying breath, grounding himself in a conviction that was part instinct, part learned wisdom. "Maybe, but I do not think you will. I think you are a good man who made a terrible choice because you were in terrible pain. I think you want this to end without anyone else getting hurt. Let me come in, Corbin. Let me help you." Another long silence stretched, the kind of silence that held a man's fate in its delicate balance. "Then you have 2 minutes. Come to the south door alone, hands where I can see them." Henry ended the call and turned to find Captain Henry Hayes staring at him, with an expression somewhere between fury and disbelief. "Absolutely not, Foster. I am not sending you in there to get yourself killed." Henry met his gaze steadily, his own resolve unshaken. "Captain, if we send SWAT in, that girl dies. You know it, and I know it. This is the only way." Captain Hayes opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, the words dying unspoken. He looked old suddenly, worn down by too many years of impossible choices, the weight of a thankless job etched into his features. "If you die in there, I am putting it on your record that you disobeyed a direct order." Henry almost smiled, a brief, grim humor touching his lips. "Fair enough." He walked toward the south entrance of the warehouse, his hands raised above his head, his heart hammering against his ribs with a furious, urgent rhythm. Behind him, he could hear the SWAT team moving into position, could feel the weight of every eye on his back. He thought about Larissa, about the text she had sent him before his shift started. "Be safe, Dad. Love you." He thought about the promise he had made to her, to always come home, to always show up. He hoped he was not about to break it. The door opened before he reached it. Corbin Brennan stood in the shadows, a handgun held loosely at his side, its dark metal glinting faintly in the poor light. He was younger than Henry expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of face that had probably been kind once before grief carved it into something harder, something wary and broken. "Inside," Corbin said, his voice flat, slow. Henry stepped through the doorway and into the dim interior of the warehouse. It smelled like dust and old concrete and the acrid tang of fear. Louisa Hartwell sat on the floor in the corner, her hands still bound in front of her with zip ties. She looked up as Henry entered, her eyes wide and dark in her pale face. She did not cry out, she did not scream. She just watched him with an expression that was far too old for a 12-year-old girl, an unsettling blend of terror and resignation. Two other men stood nearby, both armed, both looking far less certain than Corbin. They were younger, fidgety, the kind of accomplices who signed up for easy money and were now realizing nothing about this was easy. Henry kept his focus on Corbin. "Thank you for letting me in," Corbin gestured with the gun. "You said you wanted to talk, so talk." Henry looked at Louisa, then back at Corbin. "I want to ask you something first. What do you want to happen here? How does this end in a way that makes sense to you?" Corbin's face twisted, a mask of pain and anger. "It does not end in a way that makes sense, Detective. That is the point. Nothing makes sense anymore. My daughter is dead. My life is over. The woman who destroyed me does not even remember my name. So maybe I just want her to remember. Maybe I want the whole world to see who she really is. A woman who does not care about anyone but herself, not even her own kid." He looked at Louisa as he said it, and Henry saw something flicker in his eyes, guilt maybe, or a painful recognition of innocence. Louisa stared back at him, her chin lifted in defiance, despite the fear Henry could see trembling through her small frame. "Corbin," Henry said carefully, his voice gentle but firm. "I understand you are angry. I understand you are hurt. But look at that girl. Really look at her. She is terrified. She has done nothing wrong. She is just a kid who wants her mom." Corbin's jaw clenched, a muscle working furiously in his cheek. "Her mom does not want her. That is the whole point. Vivien Hartwell does not want anyone. She just wants her empire." Henry shook his head slowly. "I do not think that is true. I think Vivien Hartwell is terrified. I think she does not know how to be a mother and a CEO at the same time. So, she chose the one thing she knew how to do. But that does not mean she does not love her daughter. It just means she is broken in a different way than you are." One of the younger men, Derek, shifted nervously, his gun lowering slightly, his gaze uncertain. "Corbin, man, maybe we should just—" Corbin cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Shut up, Derek. I'm thinking." He looked at Henry again, his eyes searching, desperate for a truth to latch onto. "You really believe that? You think she cares?" Henry thought about Vivien's handshaking when she hung up her phone, the way she had finally turned to look at the warehouse, the flicker of pain that had crossed her face when he asked if she loved her daughter. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do. I think she cares more than she knows how to handle." Corbin laughed, a humorless, bitter sound. "Then where is she? Why is not she here begging me to let her daughter go?" It was a fair question. Henry did not have a good answer for it. He opened his mouth to respond when his radio crackled to life. Captain Henry Hayes's voice, sharp with urgency. Foster, we have movement at the north entrance. Civilian approaching. Female. It is Hartwell. Henry's stomach dropped. Captain, tell her to stay back. Do not let her. But it was too late. The north door burst open, and Vivien Hartwell walked in like she owned the building, which Henry reflected distantly. She probably did. Corbin spun toward her, raising his gun, his face contorted in a mix of fury and disbelief. Get out, or I swear to God. But Vivien did not stop walking. She moved with the same icy precision she had shown outside, her heels clicking against the concrete floor, a stark rhythmic sound in the sudden silence. Her face was still that unreadable mask, but there was a new, raw determination in her eyes. She walked past Corbin, past his accomplices, past Henry, and went straight to her daughter. She knelt down beside Louisa and looked at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then, very gently, she reached out and brushed a strand of hair away from Louisa's tear-streaked face. I'm sorry, she said, and her voice cracked on the words, thin and vulnerable, like breaking glass. I'm so sorry, baby. I should have been here. I should have always been here. Louisa stared at her mother, tears streaming down her face, a silent testament to years of longing. Mom. Vivien pulled her daughter into her arms, zip ties and all, and held her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Her shoulders shook, the mask shattered, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Vivien Hartwell cried. Corbin stood frozen, his gun still raised, but his hand shaking, the weapon an extension of his collapsing rage. Henry took a slow, deliberate step toward him. Corbin, it is over. Let them go, please. Corbin looked at Vivien, at Louisa, at the wreckage of his plan, at the shattered remnants of his calculated revenge. Then he looked at Henry, and his eyes were full of something that looked like grief and relief all mixed together, a terrible, beautiful surrender. I just wanted her to see, he said quietly, his voice hoarse, broken. I just wanted someone to see me. Henry nodded, his own throat tight with emotion. I see you, Corbin. We all see you. And what happened to Audrey? What happened to you? It matters. It was not right. But this is not right either. You know that. Corbin lowered the gun, his shoulders slumping, the fight draining out of him. His accomplices immediately dropped theirs, hands raised in defeat. Henry moved forward carefully and took the weapon from Corbin's unresisting hand. It is over, Henry said again, softer now, the words a balm in the wounded air. Corbin sank to his knees, his face in his hands, his body racked with silent sobs. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. The SWAT team came in moments later, efficient and controlled, securing the scene with practiced precision. Henry watched as they led Corbin and his accomplices out in handcuffs, the flashing lights of police cars painting stark shadows on the warehouse walls. Corbin looked back once at Vivien and Louisa, still holding each other on the floor, and something passed across his face, regret maybe, or a dawning understanding of the path he had chosen. Vivien looked up and met his eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke, a silent dialogue of shared pain and nascent forgiveness. Then Vivien said very quietly, her voice still raw but clear, I'm sorry about Audrey. I should have known. I should have cared. Corbin nodded once, a barely perceptible dip of his head, then let the officers lead him away, disappearing into the cold October night. Paramedics rushed in to check on Louisa, but she would not let go of her mother. Vivien held her through the examination, whispering things Henry could not hear, stroking her hair with shaking hands, a lifeline in the storm. Henry stepped back to give them space, and found Captain Henry Hayes beside him, his face a mixture of relief and professional exasperation. That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen a detective do, Captain Hayes said, then clapped Henry on the shoulder. It was also maybe the bravest. Good work, Foster. Henry nodded, suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline finally draining from his system, leaving him hollow. Just doing my job, Captain, Captain Hayes snorted, a dry, weary sound. No, you were not. You were doing something better. The news helicopters were landing now, their blades whipping the cold air, their spotlights cutting through the dusk. Reporters swarmed the perimeter, a hungry pack, scenting a story. Henry slipped out a side entrance before they could find him. He did not want to answer questions. He did not want to be a hero. He just wanted to go home and hug his daughter, Larissa. He pulled out his phone and texted Larissa, On my way home. Love you. Her response came immediately. Love you too, Dad. Proud of you. He smiled despite everything, a genuine, tired smile. Outside, the October wind had picked up, cold and sharp. Henry pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward his car. Behind him, the warehouse was lit up like a stage, spotlights and camera flashes turning tragedy into spectacle. But inside, a mother was holding her daughter. And that, Henry thought, was all that really mattered. 3 days later, Henry sat in Captain Henry Hayes's office, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He had disobeyed direct orders. He had put himself and potentially the hostage at risk. He had acted on instinct rather than protocol. He expected a suspension at minimum, possibly termination. Captain Hayes walked in holding a file and looking uncharacteristically pleased, a rare sight on his usually stern face. "Foster, you are either the luckiest son of a gun I have ever met or the best detective I have got." "Maybe both." Henry blinked. "Sir?" Captain Hayes tossed the file onto his desk, the sound crisp in the quiet room. "Internal Affairs reviewed the incident. They are calling it a successful de-escalation achieved through unconventional negotiation tactics. Translation: you are getting a commendation instead of a pink slip." Henry felt something unclench in his chest, a tight knot of anxiety loosening its hold. "I did not expect that." Captain Hayes sat down and leaned back in his chair. "Neither did I, to be honest. But here is the thing, Foster. What you did in that warehouse, it worked. Nobody died. The girl got out safe. And Vivien Hartwell has been calling my office every day since asking how she can thank you properly. Apparently, you made quite an impression." Henry thought about Vivien holding Louisa, about the way her mask had finally broken, revealing the raw, vulnerable human beneath. "I just told her the truth, Captain. That is all." Captain Hayes studied him for a moment, a thoughtful, assessing gaze. "Yeah, well, the truth seems to be in short supply these days. Anyway, she wants to meet with you. I told her you would call." He slid a business card across the desk. Henry picked it up, seeing Vivien's name embossed in elegant script, a symbol of a world far removed from his own. "What does she want?" Captain Hayes shrugged. "She did not say. But between you and me, Foster, I think she wants to figure out how to be a better mother. And I think she thinks you might be able to help with that." Henry pocketed the card, not sure how he felt about any of this. "I will think about it." He did not call right away. He went home, made dinner with Larissa, helped her with her homework, and tried to pretend that life was normal, that the weight of the past few days had not shifted something fundamental within him. But that night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, he kept thinking about Louisa's face when her mother finally held her, about the way years of loneliness had melted into relief, about the way love, even when it came late, could still change everything. The next morning, he called the number on the card. Vivien answered on the second ring. "Detective Foster, thank you for calling." Her voice was different than he remembered, softer, more uncertain, less like polished steel and more like hesitant silk. "Miss Hartwell, I heard you wanted to speak with me." There was a pause. "Then I wanted to thank you for what you did. For Louisa, and I think for me too." Henry did not know what to say to that. "You do not need to thank me. I was just doing my job." Vivien laughed quietly, a genuine, almost embarrassed sound. "No, you were not. You were doing what was right, even when it was not your job. There is a difference." Another pause, filled with unspoken vulnerabilities. "Detective, I am not good at this. At asking for help, at admitting I need it, but I do. Louisa and we are trying to figure out how to be a family, a real one. And I keep thinking about what you said that night about showing up. I want to learn how to do that, how to be present. I was wondering if you might be willing to meet with me just to talk." Henry thought about it, about whether he had anything to offer a billionaire who was trying to learn how to be human, to navigate the messy, unpredictable landscape of human emotion. Then he thought about Larissa, about the years he had spent figuring out how to be both parents at once, about the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. "Okay," he said finally. "Let us talk." They met at a small coffee shop downtown, far from the cameras and the gossip, a neutral territory where their vastly different worlds could briefly intersect. Vivien arrived on time, dressed in jeans and a sweater that made her look younger and more approachable, less like a CEO and more like a woman seeking guidance. Louisa was with her, holding her mother's hand with an ease that seemed new but growing stronger, a silent testament to the fragile healing already underway. They sat down across from Henry, and for a moment nobody spoke, the air thick with unspoken expectations. Then Louisa said very seriously, her young eyes fixed on Henry, "Thank you for saving my mom." Henry smiled at her, a gentle, reassuring gesture. "I think your mom saved herself, sweetheart. I just gave her a push." Vivien looked down at her daughter, then at Henry, her gaze filled with a complex mix of gratitude and self-reproach. "I spent 12 years building walls because I thought that was how you survived, how you stayed strong. I did not realize I was building a prison instead, for both of us." She took a shaky breath, the words coming with difficulty. "I do not know how to tear those walls down. I do not know how to be the mother Louisa deserves, but I want to try. I want to learn." Henry thought about the years after his wife, Amanda, died, about the nights he had spent rocking Larissa to sleep while tears ran down his face, about the parent-teacher conferences where he was the only dad in a room full of mothers, about the birthday parties he had tried to plan and the hair he had tried to braid, and all the ways he had failed and kept trying anyway, driven by an unwavering love. "It is not about being perfect," he said quietly, his voice imbued with the wisdom of lived experience. "It is about showing up every day, even when you do not know what you are doing, especially then." Vivien nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears, a hopeful vulnerability finally visible. "Will you help me? Help us." Henry looked at Louisa, at the hope in her young face. He looked at Vivien, at the immense courage it took for her to sit here and ask for help, to expose her deepest fears. He thought about the warehouse, about Corbin Brennan, and the grief that had twisted him into something he was not, about the ways pain could destroy you or remake you, depending on what you chose to do with it. "Yeah," he said, his voice firm with renewed purpose. "I will help." It was not a quick fix. It was not easy. But over the following months, Henry met with Vivien and Louisa regularly, guiding them through the unfamiliar terrain of emotional connection. He talked to Vivien about balancing work and family, about being present even when you were scared, about letting your guard down enough to let love in. He talked to Louisa about patience and forgiveness, about understanding that people could change if you gave them the chance. And slowly, painstakingly, something shifted. Vivien started leaving work early to have dinner with Louisa. She showed up at school events, awkward at first, stiff and uncertain, a billionaire navigating the unfamiliar world of bake sales and school plays. But Louisa was patient, and every small victory, every moment of genuine connection, every shared laugh, made the next one easier. Vivien learned to braid hair, to help with homework, and just to sit quietly while Louisa talked about her day, simply being present. Henry watched it happen and felt something like pride, a deep, quiet satisfaction. This was what it meant to serve and protect, he thought. Not just stopping the bad guys, but helping people find their way back to each other, back to their true selves. 6 months after the warehouse incident, Vivien called him with an offer he had not expected. "Detective Foster, I would like to hire you." Henry frowned, a crease forming between his brows. "For what?" Vivien's voice was steady, professional again, but with a warmth underneath that had not been there before, a subtle shift in her tone. "Head of Corporate Security for Hartwell Industries. It is not just about protecting buildings and databases. I want someone who understands people, who can build a culture where employees feel seen and valued. Someone who will not let us forget that we are dealing with human beings, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. I think that someone is you." Henry was quiet for a long moment, the weight of the offer settling over him. He thought about his badge, about 20 years of serving the city, about the cases that still needed solving and the streets that still needed protecting. Then he thought about Larissa, about how she would be going to college soon, about how much time he had missed with her over the years. He thought about making a difference in a different way, about building something instead of just stopping bad things from happening. "Can I think about it?" he asked. Vivien laughed softly. "Of course, take all the time you need." He talked to Larissa that night. She listened to the whole thing, then looked at him with those wise eyes that were so much like her mother's. "Dad, you have spent your whole life taking care of other people. Maybe it is time to take care of yourself, too. Do something that makes you happy. I will be okay." Henry felt his throat tighten, choked by unexpected emotion. "When did you get so smart?" Larissa grinned. "I learned from the best." He accepted the position 2 weeks later. Captain Henry Hayes was not happy to lose him, but he understood. recognizing the profound impact Henry had made. "You are doing good work, Foster. Just a different kind now." Henry shook his hand, feeling the weight of all those years between them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history. "Thank you, Captain, for everything." His first day at Hartwell Industries was strange and disorienting. The building was all glass and steel, modern and imposing, a towering symbol of Vivien's empire. But Vivien met him in the lobby herself, Louisa beside her, both of them smiling, a genuine warmth radiating from them. "Welcome to the family," Vivien said, and Henry realized she meant it in more ways than one. Over the next year, Henry transformed the security department into something more than just guards and cameras. He implemented mental health resources for employees, creating a support system for those struggling with the invisible burdens of life. He created support programs for working parents, especially single parents, understanding firsthand the unique challenges they faced. He built a culture where people felt safe to be human, to have struggles, to ask for help, a stark contrast to the cold corporate environment that had once prevailed. And at the center of it all was a foundation named for Audrey Brennan, Corbin's daughter, dedicated to supporting families dealing with childhood illness, a beacon of hope born from tragedy. Vivien had created it after visiting Corbin in prison. She went once a month now, talking to the man who had held her daughter hostage, listening to his story, trying to understand the pain she had inadvertently caused. It was not forgiveness exactly. It was something more complicated, more profound. It was acknowledgement. It was seeing someone who had been invisible, truly understanding their humanity. Corbin was serving his sentence, but he had something now he had not had before. He had been heard. He mattered. And that, Henry thought, was the whole point. On the one-year anniversary of the warehouse incident, they held a ceremony at the site. It had been transformed into a community center funded by Hartwell Industries, dedicated to crisis intervention and family support services, a vibrant hub of hope where darkness had once reigned. Louisa, now 12, cut the ribbon alongside her mother, both of them smiling, their faces radiant with a shared triumph. Henry stood in the background, watching, feeling Larissa's hand slip into his. She had driven home from college just for this, a silent tribute to her father's enduring impact. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet admiration. Henry squeezed her hand, a lifetime of love and pride conveyed in that simple gesture. "I'm proud of you too, kid." Later, as the crowd dispersed and the sun set over the city, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Henry found himself standing with Vivien and Louisa near the entrance, looking at the transformed building. Vivien looked at the families already starting to use its services and smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "A year ago, I did not know how to love my daughter. I did not know how to be anything other than what I had built myself to be. You changed that." Henry shook his head, a humble acknowledgement of his role. "You changed it. I just reminded you it was possible." Louisa looked up at both of them, her young eyes alight with a profound understanding. "You know what you really did?" she asked, her voice clear and resonant. "You showed us that it is never too late, that people can change, that love can grow even when you think everything is frozen solid." Henry felt his eyes sting, a wave of emotion washing over him. "Out of the mouths of babes," his mother used to say. Louisa was not a babe anymore, though. She was a young woman, confident and kind, loved and knowing she was loved. That was the real miracle. Not the hostage situation that ended without bloodshed, not the career change or the community center, but this, a girl who knew her mother loved her, a mother who had learned to show it. As they walked toward the parking lot together, Vivien turned to Henry one more time, her eyes shining in the fading light. "Thank you, Detective Foster, for speaking up when nobody else would, for daring to touch the untouchable, for changing everything." Henry smiled, a soft, warm expression. "Just Henry is fine, and you're welcome." He looked at Louisa, at Vivien, at the family they had built from the wreckage of that terrible night. He thought about Corbin, about Audrey, about all the broken people trying to find their way back to wholeness. He thought about his own journey, about loss and love, and the courage it took to keep showing up every day. "Nobody dared to touch the billionaire's daughter," the headlines had read, until a single dad spoke up and changed everything. But that was not quite right, Henry thought. He had not changed everything alone. They had all changed each other. They had all learned to see what had been invisible before, to acknowledge the unseen wounds, and to build a new future from the ashes of the past. Somewhere across town, the woman Henry had once helped, Irene, bought groceries for her neighbor, an elderly man who could barely walk. She did not tell anyone. She just did it, quietly, the way kindness should be done, a small ripple spreading outwards. And the ripple kept moving, touching lives in ways unseen, unheard, yet deeply felt. In the car on the way home, Larissa looked up at Henry, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "Dad, why did you help Miss Vivien?" Henry thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because a long time ago someone helped me, and he taught me that when you are able to, you pass it on." "Will I pass it on someday?" she asked, her voice filled with a youthful earnestness. He smiled. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." The sky deepened to indigo, stars beginning to prick through the dusk. Henry drove home with Larissa humming softly in the back seat, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because he was successful or comfortable, but because he was doing what mattered. He was opening doors for people, the way Corbin had once opened a door for him. And that, he realized, was the only legacy worth leaving.